A very good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second part of our three-part Making Headway webinar, Teaching STEM in Southeast Asia. Today, in our second session, we look at developing and supporting STEM teachers. Adopting new teaching practices can be exciting, but teachers may often encounter difficulties as they experiment with approaches aligned with STEM education goals. So in today's session, we hope to be able to learn how teachers, yourself, our esteemed audience, can better enact STEM pedagogies. We are very honored in this session to have three panelists who work as teacher educators and work towards improving the quality of their teachers within their countries and their sectors. Today, we have a very diverse panel with speakers from Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines. So I hope you do find today's session helpful, that you're able to learn as teachers and educators how best you can adopt STEM pedagogies in your classroom, and what can you, those of you who are here as teacher educators, those of you who are here as supervisors, as district officials, what can you do to help improve the quality of STEM education by teachers under your charge? So ladies and gentlemen, as we move on with today's webinar, I'd just like to go through a few clerical and administrative matters before I hand it over to our moderator. I think many of you attended our first session were curious about the certificate of attendance. As I shared during our first session, we at the HEAD Foundation are happy to provide certificates of attendance to those of you who attend all three webinar sessions via Zoom. For those of you watching us from Facebook right now, please do note that we are not able to issue certificates of attendance if you watched the sessions through Facebook. So please do log in through the Zoom channel. I believe that there's still many, well, not many actually, looking at the numbers, but there's some spaces in our Zoom page, so please do join us. And the certificate of attendance, a form will be distributed at the end of the last session, which is next Thursday. So do sign up if you wish to receive a certificate of attendance. We will check it against the attendance records that we are provided by Zoom. Secondly, we are very happy to share with all of you, our audience, about a Facebook learning group that we set up a couple of months ago, Teaching, Leading, Learning. It's a Facebook social learning group that we encourage all of you to join, because we do appreciate that although we try to put aside an hour and a half for each of these webinars, it's not necessarily long enough to engage with you and for our panelists, our moderators, and ourselves to be able to answer some of the questions raised. So join our group and continue in the discussions. They have been vibrant so far, so I encourage you to check it out on Facebook, Teaching, Leading, Learning. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, it's my true pleasure and honor to hand over to our moderator for this session, Teaching STEM in Southeast Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to hand the floor to Dr. Frederick Talaue. Dr. Frederick, please.
Thank you very much, Vignesh, for the kind and very generous introduction. I'd like to thank the HEAD Foundation for organizing this very relevant event. It's been a great learning experience for me so far. Good afternoon to everyone, and a warm welcome to you. We're glad that you have joined us today for the second installment in our series on teaching STEM in Southeast Asia. In our session last week, we focused on STEM pedagogies, and we heard varied and interesting suggestions from Dr. Ariel Baviera, Mr. Leo Crisologo, and Mr. David Chuck about what and how we can integrate STEM in our teaching. I learned that we can integrate aspects of our culture, both popular and indigenous, to make STEM teaching relevant to our learners. We heard about coding and engineering design process as learning experiences that we can bring into our STEM teaching. We also discussed issues related to age appropriateness, a heavy focus on technology, to name a few, and even the unexpected consequences of an emphasis on STEM teaching nowadays. So for this session, while still sharing with you some practical ideas for STEM teaching, we want to expand the scope of our conversations to include learning to teach STEM. This is a topic that I am personally very interested in. This is my area of interest as a researcher. Today, as mentioned by Vignesh earlier, we have three panelists from three different economies. Dr. Arif Hidayat of Indonesia, Dr. Chatri Vaikamta of Thailand, and Mrs. Rosemarie Burayag of the Philippines. At the outset, we would like to thank our speakers for their generosity of time and effort for their presentations. We will hear more about them, and we will hear from them their thoughts and their experiences later. Okay, our speakers will share their thoughts on the question, how can we improve enactment of STEM pedagogies? The adoption of teaching practices can be exciting, but also challenging. So we will hear about how you can transform STEM pedagogy and STEM leadership practices in your school, and how you can share and mobilize resources to support learning and development in your professional community. As you listen to our panelists, you would like to offer some guiding questions. I'd like to encourage you to think about adaptation. How can we teach STEM? And how can a STEM pedagogy be adapted in my context? Think about constraints and affordances. By these, I mean, what are the specific challenges and opportunities that I, as an educator, encounter when enacting or trying out STEM pedagogies in my classroom or in my community? What are ways that I can be supported in learning new STEM teaching strategies? So the idea of support is something that you might also want to think as you listen to our panelists. And lastly, think about professional development. What are programs that could be implemented to effectively sustain your development as STEM-focused practitioners? All right, so think about these four keywords: adaptation, constraints and affordances. They couple, they're always coupled. We also think about support and professional development. Okay, so we want to engage everyone in this conversation. So we have set up another poll, and it will be shown to us. This question is related to teacher learning, and it asks, which is the most fruitful way for teachers to learn new pedagogies for STEM teaching? A, just dive in and try it out in your classroom or in your community. Some of you do not teach in the classroom, but you're engaged in with different groups. So is it effective if you just try out an idea that you read or heard about and experiment right away? Okay, option D, attend trainings to learn theories first. Okay, some teachers feel that they need to know how to teach first before actually doing it. Okay, and then option C, practice new ideas with colleagues in small groups. This is a model that is quite popular now, right? You engage with learning action cells or professional learning communities, small groups that could help you learn new teaching pedagogies or strategies. And last option, watch a demonstration for the new approach. It could be through YouTube, or it could be through a workshop where the facilitator models a particular approach or a particular way of teaching STEM related subject. Okay, so I hope that you have keyed in your answers already. We will be publishing the results of this poll at the start of our Q&A segment. Okay, so I hope that you have voted. Okay, for share your ideas about this question. Okay. All right. So speaking of the Q&A, we would like to hear from all of you. Okay. I'd like to think that in this webinar, we have a safe space to ask questions. Okay. So don't be shy. Be brave, be courageous. I encourage you to type in your questions in our Q&A box. In the previous session, I was delighted to see questions even before I signaled the start of the segment, the Q&A segment. We encourage such enthusiasm. In fact, I was told that we had the most number of questions in our Q&A box in relation to the whole webinar series. Okay, I mean the other sessions or in this webinar series of the HEAD Foundation. All right, so don't forget, key in your questions in the Q&A box. Okay. All right, without further ado, let me introduce our first panelist. Our first panelist is Dr. Arif Hidayat. He is an associate professor at the Department of Physics, Universitas Pendidikan, Indonesia. Arif has been a UNESCO Fellow at Illinois State University, an expert of Simeo Kitep in science, and is currently a visiting professor at Tashkent University of Economics, Uzbekistan. So he's joining us today from Uzbekistan. He's also serving as Indonesia coordinator for STEM Leadership Education Program from 2021, last year, until 2023. This is a collaboration by the Indonesian Ministry of Education and Mary STEM at the National Institute of Education in Singapore. He is also the coordinator of Indonesia Consortium for Learning Improvement and director of Nura School, Cimahi, Indonesia. So let's all welcome Dr. Arif. I turn over the floor to you, Dr. Arif.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and especially thank you so much to HEAD Foundation for inviting me in this very good and very great opportunities. Allow me to make a share screen from my side. And this is the title of my presentation, is talking about teacher leadership on STEM improvisational curriculum making. I got this inspiration also from Dr. Eko Saito of Monash University. Just make a brief introduction about the context of Indonesia. This is a movement of STEM education for nation. Excuse me, I have to change the, okay. And the situation in Indonesia is a STEM learning becoming a massive activity that is conducted by university, school, or teacher training. I put a small one of the data from National Center of Science Teachers, Educator, a science teacher, that they have a massive STEM learning introduction, which involve more than 940 science teachers. And from that context, there are 2 points for the discussion. The first one is about localizing STEM paradigm and its pedagogy. From my point of view, and then a literature research, STEM is a paradigm that creates interdisciplinary learning and provides achievement result of science, mathematics, engineering, and technology. And then mostly, I can say mostly, it is developing more about STEM-based learning model, which was initially promoted by USAID. And they made kind of the student design, balloon, power cars, learning media, making bridge, and so on. And then regarding about research in education, especially in STEM, research focused on STEM education, also dominantly in pedagogical practice, such as increasing students' literacy, creativity, critical thinking, causal reasoning, and including disaster literacy. And according to the literature study and also my own observation, there are some positive impact of using models of project-based learning, problem-based learning, inquiry, and so on. The question comes up from this localizing STEM paradigm is, do STEM lessons provide an indispensable keys for high quality learning experience, both for students and teachers? And next, about understanding STEM from teacher training challenges, because mostly STEM coming to Indonesia through teacher training. We haven't had a particular curriculum for STEM. There are two different approaches happened in Indonesia, especially for teacher training activity. That is coming STEM lessons from core competencies of curriculum, and the curriculum is specialized for science, engineering, mathematics, and so on. So the first step, teacher coming from core competencies and then revise the lesson and become STEM lesson. Next steps or next approach, and it is new approach from our interaction with Meristem at NIE, starting from the real situation, STEM approach, come to the activities and then adopt it in students level. So basically there are two different approaches how STEM becoming a lesson in a school. So it seems that STEM curriculum making likely, because the government hasn't provided a particular curriculum for STEM, likely to be considered as STEM teacher jobs. The question is how to make this improvisation of curriculum by teacher, but based on student response. This is a very nice idea from Professor Saito of Monash University. Then in this situation, it is need of teacher leadership in learning along with their colleagues' support. So from that one, from that background and any other backgrounds, the partnership between STEM in NIE Singapore Temasek Foundation with Indonesian government and many implementing agencies creating STEM education leadership. This is how to train S means science, and M means mathematics. How to train science and mathematics teachers conducting STEM lessons for high quality learning experience of students. And then the second one is how to empower science and math teachers learning leadership as improvisational curriculum for STEM lesson based on students' response through a professional learning community. It was conducted last year, and then we had 3 different activities according to the poster. And this STEM education leadership more focusing on secondary school teachers. This is a bridging of primary and high school, and targeted science and math teachers of secondary level from different schools across Indonesia. That was about 150 science or math schools. And then the goal is for creating learning leadership of STEM teachers to conduct high quality learning experiences, both for students and teachers. And it's developed with 2 different activities, hands-on about STEM content, and then hands-on about learning leadership training. So basically there are 2 different types. First about STEM quartet framework adopted from Meristem NIE. You can check the paper here from Professor Tan and her colleagues, and also lesson study and democratic pedagogy. So we combine the 2 together. Those pictures are part of the training. And this is the implementation plan. We designed 6 until 7 days of teacher training and then blended modes with hands-on activities. Considering the COVID-19 pandemic, facilitators or resource persons from Meristem NIE participated in online, but participants from Indonesia coming directly to the place. And we divided into 2, master teacher and then teacher trainer, and then the alumni of the master teacher becoming facilitators for the teacher trainer. So we really hope there is a adult learning each other to becoming facilitator. We devoted into 5 main activities. The first one is not about more talking about STEM, but this is a very nice idea from Meristem, give a place for teachers to share their previous experiences, dialogue on STEM learning, and then put concept and then STEM framework. This is called the STEM framework, and then testing 3 different hands-on activity with those with this STEM framework, and also doing lesson observation from lesson in Indonesia, and then do some analysis. I will show you the picture how we analyze that, and then finally teachers in a group making a lesson design about what they are going to do after the workshops. And the project activities are more focusing on the how to lead teachers to have lenses, just like I'm using now lenses, on STEM improvisational curriculum making. So we designed 4 different types of the goal. The first one is how to widen the lens of the teachers, a lens of learning through lesson observation. Lesson observation in video, not direct observation. The second one is sharpening the lens through lesson analysis. From lesson observation, we're creating the transcript. This is the picture of the transcript. And then by reading the transcript and also seeing the video, we can make some analysis. And then this analysis is very useful to improve or to sharpen the lens of the teachers. And number 3 is improvisational STEM curriculum making through developing lesson design. This is a simple lesson design, but of course in STEM project. But what makes this lesson design quite different with usual lesson design using by teachers is we put predicting students' response in the lesson design and then anticipating prediction of the response. This is more metacognitive works for teachers. And number 4, dissemination through open lesson after the workshop. They can determine in which appropriate time to disseminate the open lesson and then post discussion. Some of teachers are done with the online and some of them with the offline classroom. And this is the result of the project. I took one of the case study from a teacher with 3 different lessons on STEM projects of static electricity, starting from how to make sticky tapes, to show neutral, attractive, repulsive, 3 different interactions in static electricity, until designing the project, how to optimize a flying circle plastic, and then using a rod. This cycle plastic can keep on the air by the static electricity interaction. And then I put from the video speech possession. Speech possession, it means which one is more dominant to make a speaking in the classroom. The blue one is speech possession by teacher. The red one is speech possession by students from that meeting. And teachers, it looks like from the graph, this one from bar chart, that the speech possession from teachers, this is science teacher, the speech possession is decreased. Meanwhile, the speech possession from student is increased. So teacher looks like is refrained from dominant speech, more observing students' activities. It means hidden voices. If teachers getting dominant, so students' voices will be hidden. So hidden voices of students are more heard in a group working. And this is one of the brief from many conversation with that science teacher. One of her comments, combining comments, she said that I was thinking to use the ruler and pieces of paper to show electricity case, but keep in mind, what about student asking how to show the neutral by means of negative and positive and at balance? It means this sentence show that predicting students' response should be put inside the lesson design, and it changed the way lesson should be delivered. Then finally we come with this idea and new worksheet. This idea is about using sticky tapes. So the change of the pedagogy is coming from predicting students' response and then anticipating about this students' response. Basically, what can be seen or what can be taken from these activities is the way of adult learning, not only for teachers, but also for any adult, such as academician when they involve. Let's say a teacher has academic knowledge when she or he in the university, and then when she come to the community, let's say this is lesson study community, they have community knowledge, and this knowledge can be changed or can be different if coming to the lesson design, because it has to adapt it into the what level, what subject, and then what time. And finally, the knowledge becoming students learn. So there are possibility of the bias in the knowledge because of this changing. And then by opening the lesson, doing in the learning community, this knowledge, especially about STEM, can becoming reverse innovation, reverse knowledge. So teacher can get reverse knowledge from the classroom lesson to revise, to refine, to improve the lesson design, and then improving lesson design together in the community, becoming improved community knowledge, and finally it can strengthen the knowledge from the university. There are three at least lessons learned by facilitate teacher leadership on STEM improvisational curriculum making. Number one is doing STEM lesson in collaborative ways. Collaborative, it looks like you are on the top of the mountain. Of course, this is not easy, starting by collective students, making students learning cooperative, and then finally making students learning collaborative to reach zone of proximal development by Vygotsky. It is not easy to come to collaborative, but every collaborative situation should come in from collective and cooperative, just like you climbing the mountain on the peak. And number two, it is necessary to improve or to train metacognitive activities to make teacher leadership, like predicting student response and preparing anticipation of student response. And finally, make a STEM learning communities. This is part of how teachers learn by transposition didactic to make improvisational curriculum making. I think that's it from my presentation. I should come back with Dr. Frederick. Dr. Frederick, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arif. I appreciate your presentation very much because you foreground the need for learning leadership. Teachers normally do not think of themselves as leaders, except when they are assuming maybe administrative positions or in the school. But the idea is every teacher is a leader, especially in terms of designing lessons and designing learning experiences for the students. I like that in your presentation, your model focuses on changing teachers' lenses, the way they look at their classroom, and you emphasize that one way to improve the experiences of the teachers is to of the students, of the learners, would be to try to predict and anticipate their responses to the lesson, how they engage with the lessons. And I think this is really a very important aspect. You design the learning experiences based on what the students know, right? Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frederick.
We will talk more about your work later in the Q&A. I'd like to hear more about how you collect data and analyze data to understand the experiences of your teachers.
Yeah, sure, please. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on to the next panelist. Our next panelist is Dr. Chatri Vaikanta. He is an associate professor at the Faculty of Education at Salle University in Thailand. He has taught a full range of undergraduate and graduate courses in science education, such as chemistry, methods courses, and science teacher professional development. His research areas focus on STEM education, pedagogical content knowledge, and action research. Chatri is involved in collaborative research in many countries such as Canada, Japan, Korea, Spain, Taiwan, and the UK. Thank you very much, Dr. Chatri, for accepting our invitation for you to share in this in our series. Dr. Chatri.
Okay, thank you very much, Frederick, for your kind introduction, and thank you very much for the HEAD Foundation for inviting me to share my experience and ideas on STEM education in Thailand. Afternoon, everyone. It's my honor to share my ideas and experience with you on the empowering teachers to design better STEM activities through action research. So I would like to share with you about the context of Thailand and how I work with teachers to develop their teaching activities. So STEM education in Thailand has been introduced to the teachers for many years, I think almost 10 years. And STEM is seen as an approach that integrates science, engineering, technology, and mathematics with a focus on solving real-life problems, including the development of new processes or products that benefit human life and work. So as you can see on this slide, on the left-hand side, Thailand is agriculture-based country, but not just only agriculture, but also technology. So we have two things to focus. And STEM for what? STEM, the goals of STEM is for SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. For example, no poverty, high quality of education, or gender equity. This is the goals. And there are many key characteristics of STEM approach introduced to the teacher. For example, the first one, STEM should focus on real life issues and problems, immerse students in hands-on inquiry and open-ended exploration, involve students in productive teamwork. They have to do teamwork or work collaboratively, empower students higher order thinking skills or 21st century skills, apply rigorous content students are learning, and allow for multiple right answers and reframe failure as a necessary part of learning. And here, this slide shows you the examples of real life problems and situation, especially for Northeast people in Thailand. Usually they do farming and making silk. They would like to make a silk with have a high quality, and we can bring this situation back to our classroom, help students to learn how to make quality of the high quality silk, and use the theme to help them to learn. Entering design process and learn these contents, for example, silk weaving, dyeing silk, or growing mulberry tree, for example. These are the integration of the lesson and related to the local context. So the local context is very important for the students and teachers, and help them to learn and STEM. And another activity is biomimicry. And biomimicry is an example of problem-based learning used in the STEM approach. Biomimicry is a practice that learns from mimics and that strategies found in nature to solve human design challenges and find hope. As you can see on the left-hand side, we can bring and we can learn structure and functions from the living things of the living things. In the left-hand side, we can learn from the kingfisher's beak and bring back and then learn from that structure and use the idea to develop or create a bullet train. On the right-hand side, if we would like to build a car or create a car or groups or hats or something, we can learn from the structures of fish or any other animals, something like that. That is the ideas of biomimicry. So let's see how we can bring into the classroom. I and my student work together to do some project. For example, this project, we try to develop grade 11 students' collaborative problem solving skills and by using biomimicry STEM. In the project, we adapt the ideas of biomimicry from Biomimicry Institute. So the framework is there are four, guiding principles of this biomimicry activity. The first one, inspire students with biomimicry, inspire them to explore nature's patterns and strategies and mimic them as they design their own solutions to a problem, cultivate an understanding of biomimicry basics. So they have to understand what is biomimicry, and getting outside. It means engage or encourage students to explore their ecosystem in a whole new way by observing, sketching, to begin observing what can we learn from nature. And the last one, take the challenge students to learn about biomimicry while applying it to help solve big sustainability issues like climate change. And here is the example, what happened in the classroom. We engage students to create their innovation. In here is the bionic hand is their innovation. During their, create their design. So they bring the concept or bio concept about nervous system and the sensory organ, human movement. So students look at the structure and function and learn from these, kind of bring it into the classroom, things like that. This is example. And the question is, how can we help? How can we facilitate teachers to teach them and bring these ideas, for example, using the real world situation, use biomimicry ideas, problem-based learning into the classroom? Because the problem is when teachers learn from the workshop or seminar or something, but they face the difficulties, how they teach STEM in that specific content. For example, if they teach force and motion or matters in chemistry class, they don't know how to integrate them with the specific concepts and also with specific context, specific students. That's the challenge. So we use the framework of PCK, so-called like pedagogical content knowledge for teaching them as a guideline for, our teacher professional development program. So this is a framework of our STEM teaching teacher training program. We try to help teachers to have PCK for teaching STEM, and we use action research. And action research is self-study. It's a qualitative research. It's not just doing pre-test and post-test and look at their progression, but we look at what happened during implementation, what happened during the class. And we try to facilitate teachers to look at student learning, not just their own teaching. Look at, use the formative assessment to look at student learning, and their learning and student learning outcome should be more focused on higher order thinking. I'll give you a sample. And so what happened in our program, we asked teacher, for the first day, we asked teacher to share their problems on STEM teaching, and then identify the problems and come up with their own research question. Most of the teachers, they have experience on teaching STEM, but there are many problems happen in the classroom. They share together, they come up with their own research questions. And as I said, it should be very more like qualitative research. And then when they come up with their research question, they start planning and searching this idea to plan their STEM lesson, okay? And then after planning their STEM lesson and share with their peers, validate with their peers, they're back to the schools, because we believe that just, share the idea is not enough, but they have to have a chance to try it out their STEM activities with their students and look at student learning. So we use the model of PAOR, plan, act, observe, and reflect, that can help them to reflect themselves, look at student learning, and reflect their teaching. Then back to our program again, and we help them to analyze data. They bring the evidence. What happened in classroom, they bring student artifacts, student worksheets, student reflection journals and their observation back to our program. We help them to come up with their results and present. As you can see on the right-hand side, this is a poster session. This is a very fun and a lovely activity. Teacher so much love to share the ideas and on their results and their own activities. This is an example. And these actually help us to think that, okay, the STEM training program in Thailand, we focus on teacher as a learner. We believe that they learn about teacher learning, learn about their, student learning, sorry. And they are the researcher. They look at student learning based on the evidence, not just their experience, but evidence is important. Teacher as a maker and problem solver, and teacher as reflective practitioner. Action research help them to reflect their, teaching all the time. And here is an example of action research creation. This is one question. So how do I develop my student scientific argumentation skills through STEM activity in the topic of evolution? As you can see, specific concept, topic of evolution. The goal is specific, speaks to scientific argumentation skills, for example. And as I said, we focus on higher order thinking. Here, there are 5 skills. First one is critical thinking. Second, collaborative problem solving. Third is creative thinking. Fourth is scientific argumentation, and also engineering practices. We encourage teachers to understand these thinking and use as a lens to look at student learning deeply. How to teach, what are the indicators reflect these, skill, and how to assess or evaluate students' learning skills, these skills, for example. Yeah. And what we learned from our program, we learned that teachers integrated engineering design process more into their science lessons. Teachers did address higher order thinking and science engineering practices more in their STEM lesson. Teachers engage students more in scientific inquiry and problem-based activities, but still found asking students critical questions to be challenging. This is very, interesting point. Asking question ability is very challenging for teachers. And if you look at students in the classroom, most of the teachers report that some students develop superficial ideas and models that do not help them investigate their designs and would not work if they build them. And the last one is some students skip conducting research before they design. They just design and sketch and start creating, but not do some research or some data, something like that. That's what we have learned from our program. And the last one is here is the code or examples of the data that we collect. This is the teacher's reflection. This reflect that they have learned a lot, especially they found that students do STEM activity and they engage a lot and they work collaboratively and enjoy doing the silkworm activities that related to their local context. Yeah, that's all for my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chatri. This is a very interesting presentation. You gave very specific examples of real world problems that could be integrated in our teaching. We talked about development of high quality silk and also the integration of biomimicry, right? And so these are examples, I think, of biomimicry in particular is an example of an interdisciplinary approach where you bring biology, physics, and then engineering design. And your discussion on pedagogical content knowledge and the way that you support teachers in developing PCK is through action research. So like Arif in his presentation, he talked about lesson study, right? And action research is also a very popular way of studying the classroom. And this highlights the teacher as a researcher and also as a reflective practitioner, as you indicated in one of your slides. So we'll talk more about your work, Chachi, later. Thank you very much for your sharing.
Thank you very much, Frederick.
Let's move on to our next speaker. We're happy to have with us today Mrs. Rosemarie Burayag. She is an education program supervisor at the Department of Education, Schools Division Office of Nueva, Ecija in the Philippines. She specializes in science, and she is a National Educators Academy certified learning provider. So she is a teacher trainer, a certified teacher trainer. She was also the chief trainer, regional training on cross-specialization in science and in September in 2018. She obtained her master's degree from Nueva Ecija University of Science and Technology, and she's just completed her coursework for her doctorate degree. So we'd like to welcome Mrs. Rosemarie Burayag to share her experiences, her work among the Department of Education schools in Nueva Ecija. Mrs. Rosemarie?
Thank you very much, Dr. Frederick Talaue, and to the HEAD Foundation for this opportunity to share some of our best practices in managing STEM education in the Philippines. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to present some of our best practices in Schools Division of Nueva Ecija in managing STEM education, focusing on developing and supporting STEM teachers. I am Rosemarie Burayag, Education Program Supervisor in Science from DepEd SDO Nueva Ecija. Our division is the biggest learning institution in Region 3 with 592 elementary schools, 111 junior high schools, 107 and 4 standalone senior high schools that offer K-12 basic education curriculum and special curricular programs in science. We have 14,985 teachers who serve as learning facilitator and knowledge provider to almost 348,527 learners in our division. As part of localizing pedagogy in STEM education, SDO Nueva Ecija sustained the implementation of special curricular programs in science in every congressional district from elementary to senior high school. At present, we have 34 elementary schools that offer special science elementary schools. This is what we call the SSES project. 30 secondary schools that offer science, technology, and engineering, or better known as the STE program. And currently, we have 27 senior high schools that offer science, technology, and mathematics, or the STEM strand. As part of the orientation, we have the very popular practice in our division, Sikat. And this advocates the relevance of the program by providing experiences and journey of the graduates to the applicants who met the qualification standards of the program. We also conducted virtual culminating activities in science, such as Sciencicula and Research Congress. And these are some of the performance tasks developed by our learners, which demonstrated the different trends, innovative solutions, new science and technology, education, knowledges related to education. Sciencicula, on the other hand, is a 3-minute video presentation which demonstrated how the learners understood the topic, especially difficult topics in science and mathematics with the application of different science processes. Common examples we develop, such as chemical reactions in chemistry, and how to understand difficult lessons in biology like biomolecules. We established a strong collaboration and partnership with different research and learning institutions in conducting scientific and investigations like Central Luzon State University, PhilRISE, the Philippine Carabao Center, and UPNESMed. We have curated materials for environmental awareness, game-based learning, interactive materials for science teaching, which were provided to us by the Department of Science and Technology, Science Education Institute. We have this very popular SDONE TV, DefEd Hour, and SDONE Science Virtual Hub as repository of science learning resources. And we considered the professional development of our STEM teachers, and the following trainers are conducted, such as pedagogical approaches in developing scientific process, including the inquiry-based approach, competency-based learning, low-cost method of experiential learning, the structured and unstructured method, interdisciplinary contextualization, and the recent one, integrative performance task for our learners, wherein the different disciplines are integrated in one product or output. STEM Teaching Factory, which provided immersion to teachers on science-related workplace, robotics in STEM education, online training on design thinking in K-3 science and mathematics teaching. This is something related to improvisation of materials to have another instructional materials for teachers. Designing brain-friendly learning activities and enhancing content knowledge and pedagogies of grade 10 science teachers in the new normal. And this was recognized by the National Educators Academy of the Philippines. These are the challenges we met in our division when it comes to the management of STEM education. Spiral progression approach in junior high school science that compels a science teacher to teach all science domains. He is or she is physics major, but he needs to teach chemistry, biology, earth science, and other. Low performance of science teachers in the process skills tests. They are science major and teaching the subject, but they failed to pass the process skills test given to them in 2015. Processing of unmastered competencies in the lesson. And the last one, low science performance in national achievement tests, even in PISA. The projected impact, low students' performance and outcomes for junior high school science. We developed a transformational action plan which connected the issues and concerns I mentioned to Project ECIAS, which stands for Enhanced Classroom Investigative Approaches in Science with the integration of lesson study, cum 7 is learning model in the preparation of lesson exemplar. This is a unique activity since lesson plan, lesson study plus the 7 is learning model. We have the lesson exemplar which strengthened the following processes such as engage, explore, explain, elaborate, extend, elicit, and the last phase is evaluate. On the project implementation, our SDO conducted the implementation of Project ECIAS considering the following procedures. First, identifying least learned competencies in science. Second, selecting the demonstration teachers, process observers, and recorder. Next, conducting demonstration teaching and focus group discussion. We issued an online pre-test and post-test, the analysis of test results, and the iteration of the process for the least learned competencies. And based on the result of monitoring and evaluation plan during the conduct of the implementation, we started the project in 4 selected public high schools in Nueva Ecija. And after that, We use a monitoring and implementation tool, and as a result of our M&E tool, the following findings were observed. Teachers were capacitated on the utilization of different quality assured learning resources, enhanced pedagogical approaches in teaching list mastered competencies, mastery of critical content, especially for grade 8 learners, sharing of best practices in teaching science. And for instructional leaders, for you, here are some of the practices that you can adapt to transform pedagogies of our STEM teachers for the full and successful implementation of the program. We need to identify the professional development priority of teachers to enhance their craft. See to it what is the particular teacher's need assessment or what our teachers need when it comes to pedagogy. Second, strengthen classroom observation and provide technical assistance to find the missing link between instruction and pedagogy. Next one, enhance the conduct of school learning action cell or SLAC, focusing on curriculum and instruction. And the most important practice we want to share, design a transformational action plan based on the existing status and context of the learners. Lastly, I would like to share these three important C's of successful STEM teaching. First, commitment to secure quality outputs and service. Second, collaboration with the stakeholders. And last but not the least, communication for effective feedbacking. Thank you very much for listening, and I am hoping that these insights will help you to successfully manage STEM education.
Thank you very much, Rosemarie. And thank you for sharing the initiatives of your district in terms of supporting teachers for STEM. So I heard in your presentation that you have established partnerships with stakeholders. You're building resources for the teachers can use, even providing them with immersion experiences for learning more about science content and possibly integrating STEM ideas in the teaching. So also, like Chatri, I'm sorry, no, Arif, you're looking at lesson study also as a way to understand the learners or the students' experiences in the classroom. So I like that in your recommendation, you suggest that teachers come up with an action plan based on the needs analysis that they make in their own classrooms. All right, thank you very much, Rosemarie. We will be talking more about your experiences, and we will engage our participants, our audience, in the Q&A shortly. So at this point, I'd like to go back to the results of our poll. So we will have a look at the poll results, and we will use this as a jumping board for our Q&A segment. So essentially, this is a question about, what are some of the ways that teachers find useful in their learning of STEM pedagogies. Okay, so what do we have here? For the first option, it's 9%, and I think that's the lowest. Attend seminars and trainings, 41%. Okay. Practice new ideas, 30%. And then watch demonstration, 19. All right. So it seems Okay. Attending seminars and trainings is the for our group today. They feel that this is the best way to learn new STEM pedagogies. So I'd like to ask our panelists, what do you think about this question, and what do you think about the collective sentiment of our audience at this point?
Actually, that is in preparing trainings for our teachers, we consider the teachers' need assessment, and based on it, we can identify the least learned competencies, especially when the training is about content. And we also do some surveys when it comes to the pedagogies our participants needs most. And we also consider some of the professional development priorities, which is reiterated in DepEd 50 Series 2020 in our Philippine educational system. And that's why I developed different learning and development or trainings to science teachers for STEM. And I am very confident to announce that the integration of key concepts in financial literacy status is one of the need, not only for STEM education, but also in other learning areas. I also develop training, which is about the implementation of robotics, not only for special science curriculum, but also as part of the development of physical science, which is the robotics and intelligent machine. This particular research will enhance the pedagogy and the content mastery of our teachers, especially in electronics and research. Thank you very much, Dr. Frederick.
All right. Thank you very much, Rose. So I guess Rose agrees with most of the members of our audience right now that training is a very important way of equipping our teachers to teach STEM. May I ask your thoughts on this, Arif? If you were Chatri or Arif, if you were to answer the poll question, what would be your answer?
Well, actually, I did. I choose number one.
You choose number one.
Yeah, I mean, all of them are fruitful, yeah. But I have to choose the most fruitful. I mean, digging directly from the practice. Actually, I consider lesson practice is not just a practice; it is a mining of knowledge. From teachers' perspective, they can catch different ideas and even unthinkable ideas before from students' response and then from students' previous learning interaction. So through dialogue in the classroom, actually teacher can dig up more and listen any voices from students. This can be new inspiration for the next lesson, and then we can connect with the STEM project. So I just, because this is the most fruitful, I choose that one. But all of them provided, I think, of course, fruitful as well. Thank you, Dr. Frederick.
Thank you, Arif. Okay, I think that's not a popular idea based on the poll result, but you think that that could also be very productive, like just diving right into an idea to experiment in the classroom. Chatri, your thoughts on this? What did you select for this question?
Can I have the choice number 5?
5, okay.
Like mix up.
Sure.
Actually, I choose the choice number 3 something. So I believe that, okay, I do agree with Arif that if we help teachers to dig down to their student learning, try it out and do a practice first, because I believe that right now it's not just theory into practice, program or ideas, but it should be like practice into theory, learning from the practice and come up with the knowledge. So teacher is the knowledge constructor, not just from the educator like us. Okay, So if teachers practice and then come up with their ideas, their concepts of teaching STEM, that would be good. But at the same time, as my experience, teacher needs mentor, teacher needs some guidance. So if we have the guidelines or they have some concept of STEM, I mean, maybe it's different ideas, but they have some ideas like higher order thinking or STEM teaching approach, some idea, and then try it out and bring back. It's like a back and forth. Actually, it's no one direction. It's not linear, for what I believe.
It's not linear. Okay.
Yeah,
So it also kind of resonates with the idea of dialogue, right? You mentioned that, Arif, in your presentation. The idea of hearing students' voices in terms of how they engage with the materials that we develop, and how are their experiences related to the knowledge that they build as they go through the activities. All right, so you have 3 different answers here, but there are commonalities in your responses, and so I'd like us to look at one question in our Q&A. Right. So, okay. Just a moment. Let me just pull out the Q&A box here, and right. All right. So I see questions. All right. Okay, so I think this is, there's a question here about teachers' feeling of being competent, that feeling of, can I teach STEM in an integrated way, in an interdisciplinary way? Because I am, for example, I am by training a biologist, right? And I'm not too familiar with the key concepts, how to teach the key concepts in other disciplines. So on this question, how have you tried to address this this challenge from our teachers? Rosemarie mentioned this as one key problem. Yes. in their context. Mm-hmm.
Actually, this is one of the challenges in managing STEM education, because because of this spiral progression in our educational system. What I mentioned earlier, a physics teacher needs to teach other science subjects. And as part of the possible training for them, it is good to adapt this practice, the cross-specialization. And this is a kind of training wherein the different domains will be taught to the participants. And of course, we also need to consider the interdisciplinary contextualization, wherein the localization of other pedagogy, which can be applied in the different domains in science, can be made possible through teachings or through sharing of best practices during the trainings to be conducted.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one way you have tried to address this is to bring together teachers to talk about, to learn from one another.
Yes, sir.
Right. So these are teachers who are teaching different disciplines. Okay.
Actually, sir, I would like to add something. There are science teachers who excel in other domains, and the teacher in a particular science domain needs technical assistance coming from the expert group. That's why in the preparation of training, in the selection of participants, we need to consider the career stages of our participants. For example, the master teachers group, the teachers who are new in the profession, and we can also also consider teachers who are more than 10 years or they don't they have a different kind of experience, especially when it comes to pedagogy. This is what I believe we need in teaching STEM education: the mastery of content, especially critical content, and the most important thing is the utilization of appropriate teaching pedagogy to meet quality teaching instruction in science.
All right. So I think this kind of echoes what you mentioned, Chatri, earlier about the importance of having mentors for teachers, and so mentors can probably guide the teachers in learning in an interdisciplinary way. But in your experience, Chatri, did this problem, is it a problem that's also present among your teachers in Thailand, at least those you've worked with?
Of course, that's another challenge and problems that what we found in our context. And I do agree with Rosemarie about, helping teachers to work together from from various disciplines, and they will learn from each other. For example, math teacher, science teacher, technology teacher, or physics and biology teacher. I think this is the one example. And another idea is like, it depends on the degree of integration. If, there are many models of STEM integration. What I mean is, like, for example, if I'm chemistry teacher, that not many people or not many teachers work with me. So for example, what I suggest is like, maybe in the lesson, you may feel like this is a big C, big chemistry, big S, big science, and small math, small technology, for example. You may focus more on science or on science process or science content. That's okay, because this is another model. But sometimes science, mathematics, engineering, and mathematics can be equal. This is another model of integration. It depends what we believe. But what I would like to recommend is like, look at the goals or learning outcome or competency that we would like students to earn, to have. For example, looking at higher order thinking, whatever you may be a chemistry teacher, you can do STEM in specific chemistry concept, but finally students get the ideas of, they get the higher order thinking process or whatever that we expect them to learn. That's the idea. Yeah.
Great. So yeah, there are many ways of integrating, as you mentioned. There are different models, right? And you've given examples. So the goal is to, in your view, to place value on those outcomes like critical thinking. In your talk, you mentioned argumentation and scientific practices also as end goals of your teaching. So in this case, the concepts that they are learning is just the ground for building these competencies, the higher order thinking skills that they could learn. All right. I'd like to go to Arif and ask him, in your experience, how have you tried to address this problem? It seems like it's a common problem among our different contexts.
Especially in the context of Indonesia, truly, we do not have STEM teachers. We don't have any department who educate our students becoming STEM teachers, because we don't have department of STEM education. Maybe in next year, a certain university will have it. Now, the situation is the STEM teachers are separated. Then they are adults. Not easy to teach adults here. And then what is the most not effective teaching adult is by telling. So creating a learning community when as teacher, let's say as teacher, becoming lead disciplined, and then T teacher, E teacher, M teacher, they are going to make a connection. Well, because I learned from framework of the STEM quartet, if the STEM lesson conducted by STEM teacher, so the S definitely will be bold or will be big as comparing with the T and E. And then maybe the experience from the STEM teacher, this science teacher with specific chapter, maybe close with the mathematics. So the line between S and M, maybe this is bold rather than the line. You can imagine the line, yeah? The line between S and T, S and E. This situation can be improved if those teachers, S and E, T, stay together, do the lesson together, reflect together, then there is transposition, didactic transposition, where the big S becoming the big T, the big M, and the big E. Well, I think that's the point. Thank you, Frederick.
All right, thank you, Arif. Yeah, the idea of foregrounding one of the letters in our acronym, meaning that as a teacher, I may be a specialist in science, but I could try to find connections with the other letters and find teachers who could help me like bring out those connections in the lessons that I design. So across all these responses that you've shared, I think the idea is really to collaborate, to cross the boundaries of our disciplines. Yeah, so I'm really very appreciative of your insights on this. One of the things that you talked about in your presentations also is looking at evidence in the actual conduct or implementation or enactment of a lesson. So Rosemarie and Arif talked about lesson study as a way, as a methodology for understanding students' experiences, and then also Chatri is looking at the paradigm of action research to try to understand what's really happening. I like Chatri that you emphasize that a pre-post test is not sufficient to understand what's going on in the classroom. It's a very common research design that we apply when we study our own classroom, but you're saying it's not sufficient. And your recommendation is to look at more qualitative data in among students. Can you talk more about this, Chatri? What kind of data do you collect, and possibly share some ideas like how you analyze this?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And yeah, as I mentioned that usually teacher may have very negative on doing action research or do research in the classroom. They would like to do research, but actually the term of research is inquiry or teacher inquiry. They investigate how students learn. That's what happened in the classroom. And so how can we know students learn? Actually, it's just observation, right? Observation, look at their worksheet, look at their answer. But not just look at them, but we have to use it as information. So it's kind of like formative assessment. Look at student learning and then track their progression, build them to have a better understanding or better learning, something like that. So how can we use, actually we use the tools like worksheet, answers, and all the things that will happen. And then we ask teacher, bring all the things back to our workshop or our meeting and then analyze it. So we use the qualitative analysis, something like that. That help. So they work together, discuss. I think it's quite like a lesson study. Yeah. It's quite similar. But for action research, what we focus more is like use the teachers or use student learning or their artifact of feedback to reflect back to teachers to help them to transform their beliefs and their, teaching. So the one thing that they have to think that, okay, what is the weaknesses or strengths of their teaching? How can they improve their teaching? Something like that. That's the idea. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yes. And you reminded me what you actually do is that you embed this action research component in the whole teacher training program. Is that correct? Right. And so that's part of the learning experience in the teacher training. Okay, I remember Arif's presentation, and he showed a slide there where you have a video and some graph, and you talked in the graph about student possession of speakership. Is that can you just try to help us recall and describe these data that could help teachers understand students' engagement in STEM teaching?
Oh, sorry, just unmuted. Yeah. Well, first of all, actually, in my research, we devoted it to 3 different aspects. The first one is about learning artifacts. The second one, we changed this learning artifact becoming data, and then we put this data into analysis. I would like and of course, our learning artifacts coming from video lessons, and then lesson design that is produced by the small community of the teachers, and also according to our interview with the teachers, because at the same time, I'm also becoming part of them. Let me show you a little bit, Frederick, about how is the appearance of our learning artifacts. This is a lesson video lesson. You can see a big gigabytes here. I really sorry, I could not show you because I need permission from the teacher to show the video. And the second one is how this learning artifact transformed into a data. And then let me show you through the share screen again. So we put into transcript all audible voices from the classroom. Sorry, this is into our national language, Bahasa Indonesia. So basically, we put index here, and then who talks through the index, and then what kind of the dialogue or what kind of the words mentioned. And then we put simple Excel. Actually, this is a simple Excel, and the number of words, and then who say this word. So finally, we can find this graph. It looks like earthquake graph, but this is not earthquake. So we have in x-axis, positive x-axis coming up, it means teachers, and then coming down, it means students. And then, well, actually, we do in the separate research, we more focusing on the focus word, and finally, we can find a graph from, oops, I think this is because we use Visual Basic, the graph could not be displayed. So basically, that's how we manage, and from the Excel analysis. And also, we also rely on the human analysis, such as read back the dialogues. Read back the dialogue and then make a confirmation to the video if we find some unclear situation, and then we can directly discuss with the teacher for certain topics.
Right. Dr. Arif, those are very sophisticated ways of doing your data analysis, and but it is very important because that data would give you an insight about the participation structure in the classroom, right? And that's what you saw eventually in the graph that you showed us earlier. Students are able to share their voice or speak out their ideas. So I guess that means that there's more participation, there is more externalization of their thoughts, and these are very, very important goals also for teaching STEM. You know, STEM is not a private enterprise, no, but it's a public enterprise, right? Okay, so these are very sophisticated ways of trying to understand the classroom. But before I go there, Chatri, you wanted to say something earlier. I'm sorry, I must have. I need to like catch your thoughts on.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And yeah, just would like to add something more. I asked your question, the earlier question, that what is the evidence or the data collection. One more thing that we ask teachers to do is write their reflective journals. Right after the class, they have to write their reflective journal in detail. For example, what is weaknesses, what is the strengths, and how many percentage of student learning in this class, and what is the evidence. So this question is like inquiry based, that more evidence. So can you describe how students learn? And so then they describe, and the reflective journal can enhance teachers critical thinking and critical reflection. That's very important. And then they can bring all their reflection back to analyze their own research. So one of the source of the data that can help teachers is their own reflection, not just only student learning or their student worksheet or artifacts, but also their themselves reflective journal. Yeah, thank you so much.
Right, and you bring out a very important component. You know, like learning is a way of reflecting. And I mean, reflection is really an essential way of understanding our experiences and making evaluations about our decisions when we design lessons, engage students. Right. So I'll go to Rosemarie, and maybe you can share, you know, how you use lesson study to understand students' experiences.
Yes, as mentioned by Dr. Chatri, he focused on reflection. In our system, we integrated simple analysis. For example, first, it is a practice in our division or also in other country to have a summative test. Then after that, we required our teachers to submit these mastered competencies of the topic from first quarter, second quarter, up to the fourth quarter. Then after that, we do an analysis wherein that is the baseline of the lesson study we will provide to the teachers. For example, we identify that particular topic. On the second step, we will identify or we will do a simple profiling. Who among our teachers are very expert when it comes to this particular topic, and who among our teachers need the kind of mentoring in this particular kind of topic. And just for sharing, during Fridays, we will have a demonstration teaching wherein the teacher will present the topic using a guided lesson exemplar. And as what I have mentioned, we made the application of the 7 is learning model. And from that, we will have a post-conference or the so-called small focus group discussion to have a refinement of what went wrong and what went well in the delivery of instruction. Actually, the method of gathering data is very simple, and in the last phase of our activity, we consider the developmental plans of the teacher that is based on the performance of the teacher at the end of the school year. And you will find out if the activity is working well, and also during the classroom observation. These are some of the MOBs that the school principal, a department head can use to have means of verification if the activity is doing well, not only for teachers, but also for the learners. Thank you very much, Sir Freddy.
Thank you very much, Rose. All right. I'm trying to check how much time we have left, and I realize there are too many questions and too little time. But okay, I think I scrolled through the Q&A questions, and there is a question about how do we engage training during this time of pandemic, right? So perhaps you can share about your experiences if you're continuing teacher training at this point. How are you adapting to the current context? Yeah, online, using Zoom platform. What other ideas might be useful for our teachers?
Okay, Sir Frederick, I would like again to share our practices when it comes to the conduct of trainings in this time of pandemic in the new normal. Just like we did in the last platform, we utilized the online platform, but it is a practice in our educational system to submit a training proposal which will be evaluated by the panel. It includes the training program, the training course, the everyday session. And since my training proposal is about content mastery and the utilization of appropriate pedagogy, we conducted the training for 5 days, 8 hours in a day using the online platform. And we considered the critical
That's quite
content for
tiring, 5
teachers.
days straight.
Actually, sir, we tried to inject some of best practices when it comes to pedagogy. For example, a simple sharing of best practices when it comes to the utilization of inquiry-based approach. And another thing, to engage our participants during the conduct of the webinar, we use the other session. For the plenary, all the participants are in one platform. But during the breakout session, we considered other platform with a learning facilitator to guide the activity if the activities are well conducted to the participants. And as part of the training, it goes well since participants are engaged because we ask them to open their camera during the conduct of the skills development. We also ask them to share what they observed during the virtual conduct of the experiment. And last, we also have the MNE for the day session. That's why we are required to meet the requirements set by the MNE team. Thank you very much, sir. And that is what our practice in our division when it comes to the conduct of training. It is very difficult.
All right, I'm so sorry. Just to clarify, Rosemarie, MNE, what does it stand for?
Sorry, sir. Monitoring and evaluation team.
Monitoring
and
evaluation.
They have the monitoring and evaluation day for the day one after the last day of the session. That's why the participants will evaluate if the training or if the objectives of the training are achieved or not.
All right. Thank you very much, Rosemarie. Okay, so that's one way that we're working around the constraints that we are experiencing. Any ideas from Arif or Chatri? How to engage in supporting teachers? How do we engage teachers in this time during the pandemic, teacher training or professional development?
Or maybe yeah. Or Chetri, do you want to say first? Okay, let me then. Well, basically, as an adult, yeah, we are not talking about pedagogy. We are talking about andragogy. I mean, teachers as adults, they need resource persons or knowledgeable others. Let's consider this is knowledgeable others. And then some teachers think that knowledgeable others should be coming from teacher training institute, university, professors, expert academician, which is, that's not wrong. That's not wrong at all. And the situation is, if we think that there is knowledgeable others coming from those institutions, it can create dependence line. I mean, you cannot see, but you can feel that dependence line, and it is a big dependence line. So my job actually, how to shift this dependence line from knowledgeable others from other institutions, becoming knowledgeable others from their own colleague in the classroom, their own colleague in the schools. I had a small conversation when I visited a certain school, and one of the teachers said, teacher, Mr. Arif, would you like to come again and again? I said, why? We have a lot of teachers. I think I have 20 years with him in the same school. I know all of his knowledges. I mean, making learning community basically to empower every single person becoming knowledgeable others. So during pandemic, and also not only in the pandemic, how we as a resort knowledgeable others outside from the schools, and then make a role to create or to empower all teachers becoming knowledgeable others. The question is how to make teachers becoming knowledgeable others. Where is this knowledge coming from? This knowledge coming from their own lessons. So I have mentioned earlier that classroom situation is mining, mining of knowledge, and it's kind of mining of Bitcoin, yeah, mining of knowledges. And this mining of knowledge is actually personal experience, valid experience. Then let's change this personal experience to be social experience. Open the classroom and then make reflection from that situation in a circle. We can find out that every single teachers actually they are protagonists. Yeah, I took a term from Professor Manado Sato. They are protagonists as a knowledgeable others. Yeah, Frederick, back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Arif. That's a very graphic way of describing, the need to tap on resources that are just within reach in our own contexts. So I'd like to ask Chatri to share his thoughts on this.
I think this is a big question and tough question. How can we engage teachers teaching during our pandemic situation? And my idea is like, how can we inspire teachers still in their profession? And reflection is the key ideas. And I think during the pandemic, teachers still have to learn by themselves, search for ideas and learn from other things by themselves also. And we need, mentor. But reflection, back to the reflection, as a teacher educator who work with the teacher, I think reflection is helpful. Like when teacher look at themselves, they're going to look at the student, whether it's success or not. So we can be a mirror and help them, oh, this is their strengths, this is their weakness. And then if they see the value of their teaching, they can go on. And I think empower and let them feel like, okay, they have ability to teach. That's the way. And if they have, problems during that teaching, or they get struggle, for example, during pandemic, most of the teachers do online, so they don't know how to use the tools or applications or the things. So like the ideas of TPAC, so they need ideas of TPAC, like technological pedagogical content knowledge, for example. So that's, we can introduce them and help them to see, and we can suggest some framework or some lens, some ideas for them. I think that's like a mentoring approach. That's what I think. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Chatri. The idea of lens also is something that came out across your presentations today. So it's a way of looking at our teaching experiences. So teachers adopting new vistas or new ways of looking at teaching. All right, it's unfortunate that we need to end this discussion. We started around 4 o'clock and I realize it's almost 4:45 and we have to end our discussion. But this discussion can continue virtually. We thank everyone in the audience who have keyed in their questions. These questions are really very important. They may be answered, they may be addressed in the FB page that has been set up. That's a platform for us to continue conversations. Also, for our audience, please take note that we are consolidating all your questions, and we are using it as a guide for developing the handbook that will be produced based on this webinar series. So we thank all our speakers this afternoon. Thank you very much, Arif, Chatri, and Rosemarie. It's been an interesting time talking about our experiences, engaging in teacher training, reflection, professional development. So we thank everyone in the audience for your participation. It's a very active Q&A box, and we thank you all for our time together. I have to turn over the floor to Vignesh for some remarks before we end our program. Vignesh?
Thank you very much, Dr. Frederick, and thank you very much again to our three panelists, Chatri, Arif, and Rosemarie. I think it was a very exciting session to listen, to share the perspectives that we heard from our three panelists. I hope for those of you in the audience, you found it helpful and found it as a learning journey. I think what Arif said towards the end, and he said it many times actually, it's about knowledgeable others. It's about partners. Each one of us in this room is a knowledgeable other. We have so much we can learn from each other, but we don't always have to turn to the domain experts, the academics, just to learn. Look to your left and look to your right. There's so many people we can learn from in our own institutions and our own schools, in our own settings. This series, Making Headway, first conceived in 2020, was done deliberately to provide a platform to allow educators to learn from one another. As Dr. Arif shared, domain experts are important, academics are important, and they're necessary. But there's so much we can learn from one another, from practitioners around us. So ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I encourage you to join the Facebook Learning Group, the link of which has been dropped in the chat box by my colleague, Teaching, Leading, Learning. Join the group, continue the conversation, maybe around the issues that we talked about in this Making Headway, or it may even be around issues spoken about in previous, or if you have topics that you would like us to explore further, share them in our Facebook Learning Group. There were a couple of questions raised in the Q&A box that I found particularly intriguing. Questions that I realized are going to come up in our next session. There were questions about how we can look at public-private partnerships towards the STEM education. What more can be done? There were questions that were being asked about how we sustain the momentum in the district level, at the school level. Does industry have a role to play? Oftentimes, we see education as the role of the state, as the role of the ministry, but that may not always be the case. Education, every one of us has a role to play. So check out our next session next week. Attend the session and hear from country leaders and country experts about how they have built communities of culture, what they are doing to build these communities of learning around STEM education. How can you bring the private sector into the conversation? How can you bring relationships and sustain them? Hear from our experts at the next session, next Thursday, same time, same place on Zoom. A link of that has also been put in the chat box, so please feel free to register. But on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending today's Making Headway session. I hope you found the information that our three panelists and our moderator shared to be helpful in your practice as an educator in Southeast Asia. I wish you a pleasant day and all the success in your journey as an educator. Thank you.